today's speaker, Dr. Venkat Ikurti. He basically did all his education at Acharya Nagarjuna University, where his specialization is about statistics. Then around 1998, he moved to United States, where he started applying statistical methods to various disciplines. So in this regard, Dr. Venkat Ikurti has been associated with pharmaceutical industries, where lots of data will be generated. Some are related to chemistry, some are related to pharmaceutical people, some are related to business people, and some are related to statistical people. Dr. Venkat Ikurti's main activity is to connect all these dishelved connections so that everybody can understand each other. So in this regard, Dr. Venkat Ikurti has been working for the last 20 years in the United States. He is permanent citizen of United States. He has been associated with various pharmaceutical companies such as Bristol Myers Squibb, Novartis, Pfizer, Amgen, and finally from 2018 onwards, he is associated with Bayer Pharmaceutical Company, where he has been clinical data integration manager. And he is also the founding member as well as the managing director of vConfigure Technologies. And he has been also visiting professor at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, where he is basically teaching business intelligence as well as clinical data management, along with advanced SAS programming, which is a computer program that used for fundamental statistical analysis. And today his main theme is about clinical trials and drug development. The main purpose of this webinar is that there is a huge gap between the industry as well as academic activity. So through this webinar, his intention is to narrow down this gap so that we can minimize the gap so that people can, once after complete their educational academic activity, they can directly absorb into industry so that they'll be beneficial to the industry. Now I'll hand over the session to Dr. Venkat Ikurti. Please, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thanks very much for giving this great opportunity to interact with young professionals and, of course, professional graduates from the great university. Now I'm going to share my screen. All of you able to see my screen?
Yeah. Yes. Everyone can see.
Yes. See, introduction to clinical trials and drug development. So we want to, like, generally every time, can anyone of please mute, okay, that should be fine. So these are all set thumb rules, mute your audio, better results, place your headset, so and so. That's pretty much everybody knows about at present. In this present COVID situation, stay home, save yourself and save the nation. That will lead to save the world. Nowadays, you know that like more than 450,000 people passed across the globe. Like now we should be very, very careful about following these government rules. So, in my opinion, I'm requesting all of you, don't trust any WhatsApp messages, trust only NIH, National Institute of Health, and you know, like ICMR, Indian for Medical Research, CDC, Central Disease Control, their instructions is only advisable for all the people. That's most important. Next. I'm in both sides, like industry as well as education. So my intention is with graduates, they need to get some additional skills. So don't waste your valuable time, become a certified professional along with your graduation. Nowadays, everybody is going with the new way of learning from home. It's the online sessions. Particularly, I really appreciate Professor and Vice Chancellor KRS Garu to make these online sessions is from intellectuals from across the globe. They came to this university and they are giving so many presentations. That's the way definitely this sessions is useful for reduce the gap between industry and education. Now, of course, my intention is very simple here is another meaning of real happiness is quality education. So quality education is a very, very important part. Now, of course, this is a little bit about my experience level. I am working with this company Bayer with a manager here. Okay, what is clinical trials? clinical trials helps save lives. Without clinical trials, we cannot get any new medicines. So clinical trials are essential for the development of new form of treatments, groundbreaking medicines and medical devices. I'm talking about word medical devices, as well as researching new ways to detect and diagnosis of diseases. Without clinical trials, a proper evaluation of the benefit risk profile of a new drug is not possible. Again, I'm using the sentence here is, if a pharmacist, if a doctor is making a wrong diagnosis, patient may die. If a pharmacist is making a wrong dispense of the medicine, same thing is going to be happen. A clinical trial analyst like me, if I'm making a wrong decision, thousands of people are going to be affected. Because that's the reason clinical trials and accuracy is very, very, very important. So that is the reason across the globe, clinical trials has its own significance. Now, what is clinical trials? A organized research study designed to investigate new method of preventing, detecting, diagnosing, treating an illness or disease such as cancer. So we need to maintain a research study, how we want to do research, how we want to design a study, how we want to investigate it. So many things is required. So clinical trials is big. This is almost like a 1 hour session. In 1 hour session, I'm going too much of information. I know it's too much of information for students, but those are all required to understand and learn the things. Now, what is clinical research? A organized research in human beings intended to provide adequate information on the drug used as a therapeutic agent, on its safety and efficacy. It's also referred as sometimes clinical trial management. Okay, what exactly we want to do? Suppose if I want to invent, if I want to do some new medicine, like, very first step is, for example, you are talking about like a COVID issue. First of all, directly the COVID medicine, COVID invention is not directly goes to humans. First it goes to animal studies. Animal studies, they got a positive results. Then they are going to file a petition that is known as a IND. IND means investigational new drug. Investigational new drug. The second step is like once the IND got approved, then FDA, Food and Drug Administration in the US, they are going to provide, go with the human beings. So that we will discuss it later. So first step is we are making some experiments with mice. Next is rabbits, dogs, monkeys. These 4 type of animals, depending upon the study, we are going to evaluate it. Then after that, everything is have a positive results. Then only we are going with humans. Okay. In this situation, in drug development, discovery research, formulation and development, clinical development, commercialization. I am talking in this session is exclusively clinical development, in clinical trials only, not with commercialization, not with formulation. Okay, what we need to do in clinical trials? Very simple. Evidence to provide efficacy and safety of human beings. For example, if I invented this medicine, for example, first step is I need to prove that my medicine is safe. It's safe. The second step is my medicine is effective. It's effective. Effectively, it's working. My next step is there are so many medicines available in the market. I want to prove that my medicine is much more better compared to existing drugs in the market, or it has less side effects. It's maybe more effective. So these 3 questions I need to give a clarification, explanation, proof of things. Then only FDA, Food and Drug Administration, is going to give a approval for the drug. So FDA is asking 3 questions. First question is your drug is really safe or not? Second one is effective. The third one is it is much more effective existing drugs in the market, or it has less side effects. These 3 things we need to provide a answer here itself. Evidence to provide efficacy and safety in human beings. Only well-designed clinical study, that's what clearly I mentioned, well-designed clinical study on a defined population can give meaningful results. What is meant by population here? Population is nothing but a set of individuals having common characteristic. Again, a set of individuals having common characteristic. Suppose a human population, all are humans. A male population, all are males, is a common characteristic. So I am taking that type of population can give meaningful results, whether it may be positive or negative about any therapeutic intervention. Then only we want to go with these type of things. That is the basic criteria why we need clinical trials. Next, origin and history of clinical trials. The very first clinical trial, see, that is happened in May 1747. First ever clinical trial was conducted with the sailors in May 1747. James Lind and Scurvy. Scurvy is the first clinical trial in the history. That is nothing but with the sailors. Of course, because I don't want to go with too much of this information. Anyway, this university is recording this whole session. They are going to share in your YouTube. Definitely will get all that information. See, they are giving like apples, deficiency of C vitamin. They are giving onions, lemons and oranges to some people. That gradually increases. That's the first clinical trial in history. It is going to be happened. Of course, this is when you read this one, the first clinical trial conducted systematically a classic of scurvy conducted by Dr. James Lind. The doctor concerned about high mortality among the sailors on long voyages. Conducted in a trial which 12 sailors, scurvy was given different solutions in order to see which was most efficacious. So all other conditions are similar. For the participants of the study was kept similar as possible, diet, residence, etc., etc. At the end of the trial, 2 sailors given oranges and lemons showed most improvement. That is the first clinical trial in the history is going to be happened. Okay. Now, it is 1750, first scurvy trial. Next, placebo, sequential trials, randomization, first randomized. Next, this is the whole history. We are talking about history a couple of days. So this is the way the clinical trials is not like started yesterday or 10 years back or 20 years back. It's like centuries. Okay. Now, objectives of this presentation is to understand the drug development process, understand the phases and components of clinical research, to appreciate the history behind the regulations. Regulations means government regulations. For example, in India is ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research. In the US is FDA, Food and Drug Administration. European Union in Europe, Japanese clinical trials. So every country has certain perfect regulations. How we want to follow those regulations. What is the criteria behind it is. It's not like just simply, oh, I invented this medicine, take this medicine, you will get cured. Not like that. There's a lot of research is there, lot of proof. We need to prove it. Yes, my drug is effective. How we want to prove it. So that's also we want to do it here. To understand the current regulations involved in the clinical research. This is the major objective of this my session now here. Sir. Now, healthcare industry. Ultimate goal of this healthcare industry is patient care. Ultimate goal. So patient care is influence. We want to do patient care, physicians, I mean doctors, hospitals, insurance companies, pharmaceutical industry. So I am in pharmaceutical industry. So because this is a very wide topic, we are talking about physicians, that's a one-day task. Hospital, it's too much of things. Insurance companies, but I am in pharmaceutical industry. How pharmaceutical industries are helping to make patient care. So this is a drug discovery process, target selection. If I want to invent a medicine for COVID, I want to put a target validation, lead optimization, proof of concept in clinical trials, preclinical phase. Then after that, almost it will take 2 to 4 years. Then clinical phases 1 to 3 before up to this is 4 to 7 years. After phase 3 got completed, then they are going to apply a application that is known as NDA. NDA means new drug application. Once they got approval, then the market is that comes into market introduction. Then phase 4, continuously they are doing the phase 4 because in this whole process, I'm talking about like probably phase 1 we are taking 30 to 40 subjects. Phase 2 is like maximum 300. Phase 3 is maximum 3,000. Total 3,500 people we are giving this medicine. But coming back to tomorrow, it goes to next level. You know, millions of people are using that medicine. So in here, we have only 10 days dose or 2 times dose, something like that. But in real situation, people continuously using this medicine. We want to identify that type of side effects, all these things. For that case, continuously we are doing phase 4 clinical trials. That means we are going to monitor the effect of that particular medicine when long-term usage, different people across the globe, all these things. This is a continuous process. Now, I told you like, IND. IND means investigational new drug, the very first step. Then after that, phase 1 and phase 2. If end up to phase 2, they decided they want to go further, they want to stop it. Then phase 3. Once the phase 3 got completed, they are going to file an application that is known as NDA, NDA means new drug application. Once that is got approval, then the drug is in a market. That is the exact process of these things. The next. No, drug and device development. Drug and devices. What is devices? What is drugs? That we will discuss now. The clinical trial industry is primarily concerned about bringing new drugs, devices or therapies. Drugs means particular medicines. Devices even had bandages, surgical knives, all are like devices or therapies in the general population. In the United States, most clinical trials are funded by pharmaceutical companies. Most wanting to bring a new treatment to make by the National Institute of Health, which funds research to improve the health of all Americans. See, again, I'm using that word, fund research to improve the health of all Americans, NIH. NIH is a federal organization. They are giving funding. I signed one contract almost like a 2013 at that time. I will give the title of that project, Women with more than 45 years of age, with menopause, with breast cancer. That is the title. I signed the contract with data management. Unfortunately, that project is funded by NIH. We need to take the patients from only US. Unfortunately, we did not find the patient. So that is the reason the project got terminated. Because suppose that is funded by a pharmaceutical company, we are moving that into other countries. But unfortunately, yes, whatever the funding by federal government, we need to do in US itself. Because majority of clinical trials are conducted with the idea of bringing new drug or device to market. So, which will briefly look into US Food and Drug Administration, that is FDA, Food and Drug Administration, anything. Suppose even if I want to take a cup of coffee here, that should be approved by FDA, because Food and Drug Administration. If you want more information about this process, just go to fda.gov website, contains all the information. It's like an encyclopedia, you will get all the information. Now, drug approval process, I told you, like, FDA is charged to making sure that new drugs brought into market are both safe and effective. Those two are very, very important. So FDA helps to do this. Drug approval process can easily cost hundreds of millions of dollars from discovery to pharmacy nearer to you. There are several progressive levels of studies, that is process on drug approval process. Now, preclinical studies, I told you, very first is investigational new drug. Before that, oh, I want to do something. I want to find some diabetic medicine. I want to go with cardiovascular medicine. So that is secret. They don't want to disclose anything. First, they are conducting the trials with different type of people. Then finally they got a positive results. Then they are going to apply application, that is known as IND. Once your IND got approved, then patent comes in. Then you are ready to start with the experiments with the humans. Experiments before that, no, never. So that is the reason, once your IND is got approved, then first phase 1 trials are first in man studies of new drug in humans. These studies are carried out with small sample of subject. Again, we need to discuss something here itself. I am calling subject. Sometimes I am calling as volunteer. I'm telling you one thing. Only HIV and oncology, I mean cancer. We are going to take only patients. Remaining all the studies, we are going to take healthy volunteers, healthy people, healthy volunteers. We can call it as a subject. So exclusively oncology and HIV, we are taking only patients. Remaining all the studies, we are taking only healthy people. So that is the reason. First idea is to determine the safety of a drug in a small and usually healthy volunteer study population, that we are going to do in phase 1. Then going with the phase 2. Phase 2 is a little bit bigger number. It probably like 100 to 200, 100 to 300, depending upon that. Here also we are going to monitor safety of the drug as well as efficacy of it. For example, and also drug dosage is required. How much drug is required? How much drug is in the humans? For example, if you are conducting a trial in preclinical trials with 5 mg medicine with a dog, dog's metabolism is very high. Same 5 mg medicine we are giving to humans, probably he may die. So that's the reason we are taking 1/10 of that medicine. That means 0.5 mg. giving it to 20 healthy people. Nothing is happened. Nothing is happened. Then we are increasing to another 0.5 mg, 1 mg drug. Nothing is happened. Increasing 1.5, 2 mg, 2.5 mg. When I am hitting 2.5 mg, some people with blurry vision, some people with anxiety, some people with other things. So that indicates that body is not accepting 2.5 mg dosage. So what is maximum tolerated dose? People call it as MTD. MTD means maximum tolerated dose. That is 2 mg. So that is the drug dosage. We want to identify the drug dosage and we want to do all these things. I told you, like, drug development process is not like 1 hour discussion. It's like long. But I want to, within this time constraints, I want to throw some ideas. If people wants to go to clinical trials area, we need to learn all these things. Okay, that is for phase 2. Generally conducted target study population. Now phase 3. Phase 3 trials are large trials, particularly in population numbering from thousands, hundreds to thousands. Yes, maybe like 3,000, 4,000 people. These are all critical stages of the drug maker to run to show a new drug is both safe and effective. And also, my drug is much more better compared to existing drugs in the market. So that's I need to prove it. Once everything goes through, fine, then we are going to file a new drug application that is known as NDA. Once FDA is going to review all the data, all the information, then if they satisfied with all the results, then they are going to issue approval. Once that got approval, after phase 3 approval, then the drug is in a market. Then after that, phase 4 trials is going to be start continuously. Phase 4 trials are post-marketing trials, are usually conducted to monitor the long-term safety of a new drug after the drug is already available to consumers. The next one is drug development process. What is device process? Device approval process. FDA is also in charge of regulating new medical devices. What is new medical devices? Class 1 devices, Class 2 devices, Class 3 devices. What is Class 1? Class 1 devices carry little risk of a patient. They include as elastic bandages, surgical instruments, elastic bandages, surgical instruments. Class 2 is a little bit higher, like motorized wheelchairs, infusion pumps. Similarly, Class 3 devices is like a replacement of heart valves and implantable defibrillators. So generally, Class 1, obviously the approval requirements for Class 3 device is much higher than Class 1 device. So this is also a device development process. Now I think, like, particularly in in API somewhere else in Visakhapatnam, there is a hub for this approach. Like all these medical devices industries are coming into the country. It's now actually. Now going back, I told you, like, explanation with the phase 1, very less people. Phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, long-term surveillance, long-term morbidity and mortality. Like, now I told you the numbers also. Phase 1, we have a very less number here. Phase 2, phase 3 is a continuous. Phase 4 is like a never-ending process. So, what exactly tasks involved in clinical trials? Protocol development, volunteer recruitment. See, I'm using the simple example. Protocol development. Germany. How many cases are there in Germany? How many deaths are there? Almost like 186,000. Deaths are less. Last 2-3 days, there is no new cases recorded. Because their protocols are very strong, very strong. Even South Korea also. So first one is, when you are doing something, first step is identify the protocol development. The next one is volunteer recruitment. We need to recruit the patients, recruit the subjects. Clinical conduct, how to manage the clinical trials. Monitoring is important. Data management is important. Clinical statistics or statistical programming, medical writing, quality assurance. See, these are all the tasks involved in developing a clinical trial process. So where we are going to involve, most of the times I am involving in data management and clinical. This area I am going to invite. Most of the times doctors, they are going to involve in medical writing process. Very few instances I am involving in protocol development or protocol review, not development, review. So this is the recruitment is totally different person's job. The labs and hospitals, they are going to recruit the people. Quality assurance is another area. So this is not like a one person's task. There are so many tasks involving in developing the clinical trials. Now, what is involved? File IND, first step, FDA. Then your patent is going to be started. This is the whole process. Here you need to remember two things. One is with IND means investigational new drug, and NDA means new drug application. We will discuss later things. Principal investigators curriculum. That's very important. Resume is very important because depending upon that whether he is a principal investigator or not investigator. Possible benefits and risks also in clinical trials. Okay. Now, clinical development process. Here is site management, site systems, how we are collecting the data in management, regulatory submissions, trial management, pharmacovigilance, financial management, clinical management program, all these things. Suppose, for example, COVID studies are conducted across the globe, multi-centered. See, when you are doing a multi-centered, this is the approach we want to get it. And finally, we are integrated. We are getting the integration of all the data, and we are going to identify, we are going to get the results. Depending upon the results, FDA is going to take a decisions like this. So what is the team of these clinical trials? Clinical investigator, site coordinator, pharmacologist, methodologist, biostatistician, sales programmers, lab coordinators, reference labs, and also project manager, clinical research management, associate. See, regulatory affairs. Here a lot of regulatory things like 21 CFR, Part 11, etc. Clinical safety surveillance associate, information technology professionals, trial pharmacist, clinical supply, auditor and compliance. So many people are involving in these clinical trials. Okay. If you see this diagram, subject, I told you the same thing like a subject. Almost except two studies, we are taking always healthy volunteers. Those two studies is oncology and HIV, we are taking only patients. So investigator is like a doctor, for example. They taking the sample here itself, case report forms. Okay. Next, monitoring. The data comes like this, data manager. Once the data is here itself, clinical data, statistician is providing the results, the reports. Then it goes to regulatory authority. This is the whole clinical trial process. Now, suppose for example, most of them I know the students or professors, of course, they are going to encourage people to enter into this area. If the people who wants to get in, olden days, one particular technology or one particular concept is enough to get a job. Now it is not like that. If the people who wants to enter into the corporate world in clinical research area should familiar with a little bit about data management, little bit about biostatistics, little bit about programming side, and also pharmacy knowledge in the clinical trials. If you are taking a pharmacy graduate, they know only this much. The statistics person knows this part. A computer science person knows about this. But you should know a little bit about all these things. Then it is very helpful for getting to the corporate. So that is the reason single skill is not enough. You want to get a multiple skills is required to grab the opportunities. Now, see, in clinical trials, there are so many milestones on there. Protocol draft produced, protocol approved, planned start date, contract non-disclosure, IRB approval, drug shipped to first center, center initiation visit, etc. All these things. There are so many milestones are here, so many milestones. So in this so many milestones, we don't want, like, some companies have like 10 milestones. Here I have like 35, maybe 40 milestones. For example, when most important is people are concerned about first subject first visit to last subject first visit. See, protocol approval to FSFE. How much time is required to protocol approval to FSFE? How much time is required to first subject first visit to last subject first visit? How much time to last subject last visit to database? I'm going to explain a little bit. First subject first visit to last subject first visit. That means this is a recruitment plan. First subject first visit. That recruitment started. Recruitment started now. Last subject first visit. Last subject first visit means recruitment is over. I am not going to recruit any person because last subject first visit. How much time is required to get this span? That is known as recruitment span, recruitment period. Suppose if you are taking about US, some studies, the recruitment is like 6 months, 180 days. It may be more. It may be more. Simple example. If don't take it negative way, just advantage I'm talking about. Suppose if I am going to take a diabetic patients, 2,000 diabetic patients. Suppose if you are going with in the US, it takes like 180 days, 6 months. Suppose if I want to go to India and I want to take like a male with this age group, this diabetic, this A1C is this much. Within 1 day I can recruit the patients because huge patient database. That is the advantage, particularly in India, particularly for clinical trials. So here 6 months we need to wait for recruiting the subjects. Here 1 day we can get it. That means it saves 179 days. That's save. That's why they are going to think about it. Simple example I am going to, if you are on chemistry side or pharmaceutical side, probably you are all familiar with word atorvastatin, pravastatin compounds. The name of the drug is Lipitor. Their sales in Lipitor is a cholesterol medicine. Sales in Lipitor is almost like $11 billion, not million, $1 billion. For our calculation, we can make it 12 billion. 12 billion. Per month, 1 billion. Per day, 30 millions. If a pharmaceutical companies are losing 1 day, they are losing 30 millions. That's the reason they want to speed up the whole process. That's the reason they are looking into other countries where data is available. So that is the reason. These are all the speed goals. We want to identify, we want to get it, how to increase the speed of the whole clinical trial process. How to improve the whole clinical trial process from draft protocol approved to here, draft protocol approved to like clinical study reports final. First milestone, so this last milestone, how we want to increase this whole clinical trial process. That is the concept here. Now, there are so much of vocabulary is required. What is meant by protocol? A planned course of action for the clinical trial. For example, this session, we want to start it by 4 o'clock. We have a plan like by 3:30. I got an email. Oh, 3:30 better to join. I joined. We tested a couple of times. Everything goes through. Voice is good. Same thing, a planned course of action for clinical trials. We are playing with human lives. Very important. Protocol is established prior to start of the trial that states the number of participants, eligibility requirements, agents, etc., etc., etc. Investigator, a researcher in a clinical trial. Sponsor, who is sponsoring? Most of the times, so pharmaceutical companies. Institutional Review Board is a part of FDA. They are going to review all that information. Informed consent, double blind. Double blind means when you see a new drug is there itself. Suppose, for example, a subject, what he is taking, he don't know. He don't know. Investigator, what he is giving to person, he don't know that. So that is known as double blind. Subject, what he is taking, he don't know. And what he is giving, don't know. That is known as double blind. Those two people don't know anything about it. I am the person, I know that this package contains active ingredient. This packet contains no active ingredient. That is nothing but a sugar pill. Sugar, I want to test it. My drug is really effective or not. How I want to test it effective is simply I am taking 100 people. Out of 100, 70 people with the active ingredient, same package, everything is same active ingredient. Other people have placebo, or sometimes people call it as sugar pill. Sugar pill. How many 70 people with the active ingredient response? How many 30 people with the sugar pill placebo is impact? That's where I going to identify, yes, my drug is really effective. For that case, double blind is required. There are a lot of things, double blind, randomization, triple blind, washout period. All this terminology is a little bit important. Controlled group, randomization, placebo, follow-up, prospective study, retrospective study, etc. All these things. There are so much of regulations are there. The regulations means particularly when you see this one, code of this, when you see this book, like the code of federal regulations and ICH guidelines. In a pharmaceutical companies, they are supposed to give this book to each and every person working in an industry. We are supposed to read that book. That contains a lot of information about the industry standards and guidelines. Good clinical practice or ethical and clinical standard for designing, conducting and analyzing and monitoring reporting of clinical trials. Clinical trials. Here the ethics is very, very important. Ethics, because we don't want to, again, I'm reiterating the what again. If a doctor is making a wrong diagnosis, patient may die. A pharmacist is dispensing a wrong medicine, same thing is going to be happen. A clinical trial analyst like me, if I'm making a wrong decision, thousands of people are going to be affected. So that's the reason we need to follow good clinical practices, ethical and clinical standards for designing the clinical trials. There are so much things. 21 CFR Part 11, electronic records and signatures. 21 CFR 50, protection of human rights. CFR 50. CFR means Code of Federal Regulations. 54 is for financial disclosure by clinical investigator. How much money we are giving to that much. And IRBs 56. 312 is for investigation of new drug, FDA approval. These are all this information is available here itself. And of course, ICH guidelines also. International Conference of Harmonization, ICH. What is this ICH? Harmonization. We need to maintain the hormones level, first of all. This International Conference of Harmonization, ICH, is a non-profit group that works with the pharmaceutical and regulatory authorities. Every pharmaceutical company in the world, they should follow this ICH guidelines. ICH guidelines, because those guidelines is particularly for E3 guidance document. This document is describes like detailed reporting, content of clinical study reports, what type of reports is required. Everything is there in the E3 guidance document. Similarly for E9, E9 is for statistical principles in clinical trials. Statistical principles. Nowadays, everybody knows about what is mean, median, mode, etc., etc., etc. My question is very simple. In which situation you are going to use the statistics? Which situation you are going to use statistics? People are working with, people are studying with the correlation. Correlation means relationship between two variables and they are going to use a formula. I don't care about it. In which situation you are going to use it? I'm giving a simple example. There is a relationship between hypertension and blood pressure. Hypertension and blood pressure. I want to prove mathematically, yes. How I want to prove it? Correlation is a relationship between two variables. I don't want to discuss any about a formula. So if the correlation is equal to positive, positive means two variables moving in the same direction. That means people having with more blood pressure has more hypertension, or less hypertension with less blood pressure. Suppose correlation is equal to negative. That means two variables moving in a opposite directions. If it is one increases, other one is going to decreases. That type of applications is required to enter into the corporate. That is my main intention. There is a huge gap between industry and education. So we want to reach, of course, not only in India, not only America, everywhere there is a gap is there, but US is gap is little bit less, but India is little bit more. That's the reason we want to reduce the gap between industry and education. Whatever you are learning at university level, whatever you are learning at college level, apply that knowledge into industry. How this knowledge is useful for the industry, how this knowledge is useful for getting opportunities. If you are thinking like that, you are going to like a star. So E3 is the statistical principles for clinical trials. Now, there are so many other things. E6 document, sponsor responsibility, etc. Like sometimes people call it as a GCP. GCP means good clinical practice. GMP, good manufacturing practice. So that's the reason people call it as GXP standards, something like that. All these documents are available in online. Go to ich.org website, or 21 CFR Part 11 documents is also there itself. Everything is there itself in online. Just you can read certain things. Okay. Now, at present, everybody talks about like a CDISC, Clinical Data Interchange Standards Consortium. Because I work with the Bristol Myers Squibb, they call it as demographics. I work with some other company, they call it as DEMOG. Some other company, I mean, DEMOG means demographic information. Some other company with some other name. We are all sending for approval purpose to FDA. FDA is spending a lot of time to understand what is this. That is the reason they are spending a lot of time with understanding the data. Now they realized that in 2008, yes. They realized that no, all pharmaceutical companies should follow certain standards. Those standards are like this. Clinical Data Interchange Standards Consortium. Any pharmaceutical company, they are sending a data, these standards only. Adverse event, previously some mentioned adverse event, some mentioned AE, some adverse. Now everybody should follow AE, 2 letters. AE means adverse events. Physical examination, PE, medical history, MH, etc. For that case, there are 4 models: SDDM, ADM, operational data model, define.xml. These 4 ways is exclusively part of this CDISC standards. Now, health outcomes, etc. Everything. Other issues: National Institute of Health, special populations, particularly for these COVID issues, data safety monitoring boards, orphan drugs. Orphan drug means, suppose for example, a diabetic, thousands of medicines are available, a cardio, so many medicines are available. Suppose some rare diseases, 1 million population, only 1 person got affected. What they are going to do? Pharmaceutical companies never work on this because they don't get money. On that time in US, that type of people, that type of rare, that people call it as orphan. NIH is going to sponsor the money. How much money it is doesn't matter. And National Institute of Health is sponsors those type of medicines. They are going to conduct a trials and they are going to make their lives is happy. So that type of clinical issues are there, particularly for federal government is going to do all those things. some dictionaries across the globe. We need to follow standards. MEDRA, an international conference on harmonization initiative, is a standardized dictionary of medical terminology. It's a standard. World Health Organization, that's ICD, International Classification of Diseases, FDA information. These are all worldwide. Suppose, for example, we are using a lot of MEDRA. All these insurance companies, they are using ICD because international classification of diseases, depending upon that, they are going to ICD-11 guidelines are there itself. Depending upon the industry, they are going to use these standards. Do you know, this is from US records, not across the globe. 95% of people who have participated in a clinical trial say that they will be willing to participate another one. They're happy. That's the reason they are going to willing to participate another one. 91 of those participants rate their experience as excellent or good. Out of these 95, out of 91% is excellent is good. That is the way clinical trials is helps to make human lives is better. Okay, particularly in India. See, when you see this one, size of the circle indicates the resource and availability. Okay, this is India has a bigger circle. Why? Maximum number of professional graduates per annum. 85% of CMM level 5 companies are in India. 95% of Fortune 500 outsourced services to India. People strength like skill, quality, resource cost, language abilities, and other skills. Highest English speaking people, computer related. Everybody knows about computers. Infrastructure is good. Country specific risks. Time zone attractiveness, that's very important. Time zone attractiveness is, suppose now your time is evening, my time is day, not yet started, my time is only 7:20. So that means you can do something and I can come and I can see the reports. That is the advantage, particularly. And a lot of times people mention that, oh, all these US companies are sending this work to India because of cheap price. No, never, never. Suppose, for example, I have a medical problem. There are 2 medicines available in the market. 2 medicines available in the market. Out of these 2 medicines, this medicine costs like 1,000 rupees. It will cure my problem in a day. This medicine is only for 5 rupees. It will cost. I can use at least 1 year to solve my problem. Which one you are going to use? I am going to use 1,000 rupees because America is sending the work because India, not because of the price, because of the quality of the work we are going to develop. We are going to deliver. So that is the reason I am requesting all of you to improve your skills, most important, and industry requirement, what exactly industry is looking for. Learn those things. I know like Mizoram University is 76th ranked, one of the best universities. Better to utilize all the libraries, all the resources, excellent facilities. Highly, he's an inspiring personality, is your vice chancellor. So take the advantage of all those things, become like a very good citizen of India that will helps for the country, helps for the nation. See, finally, I'm giving a thanks to the great personality, Professor KRS Garu, Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, and the organizers of this session. Finally, this is the thanks to all these participants. Feel free to reach me if you need any additional information or clarification. This is my WhatsApp number, 732-662-0832, and this is my email address. Now this is open for question and answer sessions.
At this moment, I just like to remind the participants, since we have another session is going to happen after this session, I welcome 2 or 3 questions. Rest of the participants, you can send your query to Dr. Venkat Ikurti. Since you got his email ID on the screen, only 2-3 questions are allowed for the time being, because the next session for which the next speaker is also ready.
Somebody asked me like a clinical trials question. It will take some time because we need to prove a lot of things. Then only it will be going to be happen. Otherwise, you can send me. I cannot find in a chart window with that exact question. Yeah, that's yeah. You can ask the questions. It doesn't matter absolutely. We can conduct the clinical trials in current scenarios, COVID-19, how we can recruit the volunteers. How we can recruit the volunteers means COVID-19 is like an antiviral and anti-infectives area. Antiviral and anti-infectives area is not related to oncology or even HIV. So we are going to take the healthy people first and we want to test it, then only we can get it. We got some information
Yeah.
about.
So in this regard, then I thank Dr. Venkat Ikurti for his valuable time and valuable presentation. And I also thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor K.R.S. Sambasivarao. Because of his infectious enthusiasm, this entire webinar session is happening. And so far we have conducted close to 65 webinar sessions. So that way, in this regard, certainly we thank today's speaker, Dr. Venkat Ikurti, and I also thank Professor K.R.S. Sambasivarao, our Honorable Vice Chancellor. And I right now hand over the session to Dr. Rentla, who will be hosting the next session with Mr. Sudhakar Vardhanapu. Dr. Rentla.
Hello, am I audible?
Very, very much, sir.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Lalping Liana Rentle, Assistant Professor in the Department of Management, Mizoram University. Today, I'm very grateful for this wonderful opportunity to introduce the speaker for the next session in the presence of our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Mizoram University. So the next speaker and resource person for this webinar this evening is Mr. Sudhakar Vardhanapu, who is the Chief Financial Officer of Information, Technology, Electronics and Communication, Government of Andhra Pradesh. He is a man whose vision is to be an effective and strategic communicator, fostering innovation and transformation. He is an expert in the field of public administration, law, and also science. He has achieved great things over his career and experience as the Chief Financial Officer of Information Technology, Electronics and Communication, Andhra Pradesh. He's also a trainer in e-governance for NISC, Hyderabad. He has also served as the District Head of Treasuries and Accounts in Visakhapatnam, Kurnool, Anantapur, and also in Guntur. He is a certified trainer in the e-governance, and the list goes on and on. So from his career and work experience, we know that our speaker this evening is a very qualified man in the field of business communication. And not just traditional communication, but communicating through online platforms, imparting knowledge through online platforms, which is very, very important and crucial in today's world. Therefore, our session this evening will definitely enrich participants of this webinar and gain knowledge in the field of business communication. And as the research says, that our quality of life heavily depends upon our ability to communicate with others around us. So regardless of our career path, we all need to know how to communicate in life. So now I would like to invite and hand over the time to Mr. Sudhakar Vardhanapu to deliver a lecture entitled Business Communication for Professional Graduates. So sir, I hand over the time to you, sir.
Thank you for your kind words, Dr. Latminglian Rentla. I hope I have pronounced it right. Thank you so much.
Right, sir.
And well, after a very intensive lecture on clinical trials by Mr. Venkat Ikurti, I think my session is going to be a lot more lighter. And I think most of you will enjoy it. Well, a very warm and nice good evening to Mizoram, to the Mizoram University folks. So my thanks to you all, especially the Vice Chancellor Garu, the organizers, and the participants for having invited me for this webinar on business communication. And I was going through your website, and I was very impressed by your motto, the university's motto, greater deeds remain. And I was very, very happy to know that a university of repute, a Central University has been set up in Mizoram, and where the setting up and fostering of knowledge will lead to greater deeds, and I'm sure greater deeds will remain. That said, let me go through my presentation. Is my presentation visible, sir? Okay. So, as you very well know, we are in a COVID-19 world. Please stay home, save yourself, and save your loved ones. Thereby, you save the nation. And in this period of home quarantining and work from home, don't waste your valuable time. You can learn from home by attending a lot of online training sessions and maybe undergoing a lot of certifications. Now, if you look at this, success and excuses do not talk together. If we are talking of excuses, we need to forget about success. And if we want success, we cannot give excuses, right? Yeah. Then every successful person has a painful story, and every painful story has a successful ending. Like you say, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. So accept the pain and get ready for success. And for the purpose of this webinar, and that success is going to point to business communication. And when you are adding the adjective business to communication, here we are not necessarily talking of business alone. Here we are referring to a kind of a professionalism. Business must run only in a professional manner. Then look at this.
Your screen, sir.
Sir,
can you please share your screen? We are unable to see your screen.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Actually, that's what we were trying to communicate to you. We are not seeing your face. We are unable to view your PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, sir. And now let me see.
Okay.
Okay, sir?
Yes,
Yeah, now it is visible, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Okay, sir. Please
I'm
continue.
really sorry. Yes, sir.
Yes.
So, yeah. Now, as you very well know, Chanakya is one of the wisest men in terms of economics in India. He says education is the best friend. An educated person, as you very well know, is respected everywhere. And education beats the beauty and the youth, because education is supreme. And that now we have 9 engagement objectives for today. 9 engagement objectives. The first objective is communication as building blocks of business. Then we look into effective writing for jobs and effective writing for clients. Then effective report writing and how to make a compelling presentation and how we can leverage a body language in communication. So as you very well know, the art of communication is the language of leadership. And the 5th one would be the 7 C's. We'll look into the 7 C's of communication, easily understandable and relatable too. And we'll also look into the guidelines for effective business communication. And we will prepare how to prepare a balanced resume and how do we conduct negotiations. So, see, as you very well see that we may have very good academic qualifications, we may have excellent professional experiences, but 80% of our lives we succeed because of our communication skills. So communication makes all the difference. And there is one great gentleman from India and whom the entire India loves, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. He says most of the time communication gets confused with conversation. So conversation is chit chat for fun. You may not remember, but communication is different from conversation. In fact, the two are distinctly different. So here is a gentleman who has been successful in communicating, and he has written a book called A Billion Indians. Then when you look at the perspectives of business communication, if you look at the prehistoric times, we started with a sign language and we started speaking. Then in the historical times, we invented a language. We wrote in a particular language, a script, and a society which has written communication is known as a cultured and advanced society. What makes a business communication? Business communication develops business communication develops leaders. It creates leaders out of you. The leaders create more leaders and followers. However, in the followers also, the leadership quality is imbibed. So as we can see, leadership makes us take effective decisions, the right decision at the right time. And business communication also must give us profit through productivity. An employee or an associate in an organization, if he knows the aims, the objects, the vision and mission of the organization, he will ensure that he will help his organization generate profit, and the individual or the associate will grow along with the organization. And when we talk, we'll make a distinction between a business communication and a public communication. For the purpose of this webinar, public communication would be communication in the government. Okay. Now, business is purely profit oriented. Accordingly, communication business organization depends on the aims, objectives, vision and mission of the organization. As we have observed n number of times, many organizations fail because the individuals working in the organization and the associates in the organization fail to understand the aims, objectives, vision and mission of the organization. So immediately an individual on entry into the organization, if he is trained in the aims, objectives, vision and mission of the organization, the individual or the associate is bound to make the organization grow and generate a lot of profits, and he will grow along with the organizations. As organizations grow, our GDP in our economy also grows equally. And on the other hand, the government is primarily into public service, which is in a utilitarian mode. When we say utilitarian, it is greater good for the greater number of people. Now, it does not mean that government does not have any commercial interests. 5% of government or 10% of government does run companies, corporations and societies which generate profits to the organization. And when we talk of businesses, businesses also do a lot of social service. By the Companies Law Act 2013, the government has mandated that 2% of the profits generated by organizations in a cumulative 3-year period must be used for greater good of the greater number of people. Here, well, what and why of business communication? It is required for a professional environment. It should have clarity of thought, for better interaction, If you do in an organization, if an employee does not understand the aims, objectives, vision, and mission of the organization, or any communication sent to him, it is likely that he will fail as an individual in the organization. Then for better decision making, then it evolves leadership and effectiveness and efficiency. Now, I'll give you a small example. In the late 90s, the NASA and European Space Agency sent a Mars climate orbiter to the Mars. So, what happened was there was a lander. That lander, on landing into Mars, should land and make a study of Mars. But unfortunately, the lander and the entire Mars climate orbiter crashed in Mars. And that is because when they did a lot of studies on that, and on the post-mortem they realized that the NASA engineers and the European Space Agency engineers were using two different systems of measurement. The NASA engineers were using an imperial system of measurement, as you very well know, feet, pounds, inches, and so on. And the European space engineers were using the metric system that we use, meters, meter, liter, and grams. Though they were coordinating with each other, they did not check what measurement each other were using. So assumptions were made. Therefore, lander crossed. So, what, the where, how, and by whom of business communication. Language is a business, professional, and it is used for convenience between individuals, between teams, and between organizations. So now let us first find out what business communication is all about. Communication is integral to management. Without communication, there is no management. The basic functions of management are planning, organizing, staffing, directing, controlling, reporting, and budgeting. You can remember post-corb, so which easily you can remember it. And business communication involves a regular and constant flow of information to and fro. And business communication is goal-oriented. We have talked of the aims and objectives of the organization. The objective of the organization will lead to a goal. So there are certain rules, regulations, and policies which are communicated within and outside the organization. The business is regulated by certain rules and norms. Though business is private, it is the government which regulates the business through the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, through the Companies Law Act 2013. The business communication can be of two types: the oral communication, what I am doing right now; the written communication, what you are seeing on the screen. Both are very, very important. Or when we speak of oral communication is for immediate feedback. Say I am speaking to a lot of people and they understand and they realize whether it's interesting, whether this is useful or not. The feedback is immediate. Of course, you are not going to tell me, but then in your mind, you know. Written communication is stable. The feedback is not immediate, but very, very important in terms of any meetings, whether in the private sector or the government, the minutes of the meeting are recorded. A recorded minutes is useful to be used as a policy making in that a later date. And feedback is integral part to business communication. Without feedback, there cannot be, we do not know whether the intended communication has been reached by the receiver. And organizations are very large and they involve a large number of people. Therefore, communication is important. There are various levels of hierarchy in the organization. Therefore, our communication needs to be different. Because of the various levels of hierarchy, we need to understand the individual, the group, the team dynamics in an organization. The greater the number of levels, it will be difficult for us to make everyone see the organization's points of view. So, one of the way to make a lot of people understand the aims, objectives, vision, and mission of the organization is the activities of the organization per se, and communicating to all levels at frequent intervals so that they understand the aims, objectives, vision, and mission of the organization. So we will now look into the components of the communication process. We have a sender. The sender is sending a message, which is an encoded message. We call it encoded because the sender knows what communication or what message is sending to the receiver. The receiver, on receiving the communication, he decodes the message sent by the sender. And the receiver, when he tells or sends a message to the sender that I have received this particular message, the sender will know whether the receiver had indeed received the intended communication. Please underline the word intended communication. In most of the organizations, in a very simple example, say in an office, the boss calls the secretary and gives a few directions that, see, my friend is coming today, you make all the arrangements. So the secretary, what the secretary will do is, he will wait for the friend, and once the friend comes, he will make them sit in the office. It is likely that the secretary thought that taking care of the boss's guest is only keeping him in the office and keeping sitting there. And if something comes up, the secretary might go away. It is a normal courtesy to offer water or tea or coffee to the guest. So it is likely that the intended message has not reached the receiver. Here we are just reviewing it again. There is the context is important. The sender and the encoder, the message, the medium. The medium is either oral, written, emails, WhatsApp, whatnot. And the recipient and decoder, and feedback is very, very important. Without feedback, we cannot know whether the intended communication has been received by the receiver. And now let's go into the second module, the 9 modules. This is the second one, which is how to write effectively to get a job or to write effectively for a potential client. When we write something, we need to avoid jargons. For example, every department, every subject has got its own jargon. Suppose you are speaking to a person with the same subject knowledge, using jargon is okay, but it is not likely you will be, in businesses, you will be meeting with the person with the same background. So therefore, you should avoid jargons. Jargon is, say for example, you write CFMS. It could be, they can think that it could be something. What the sender means is a comprehensive financial management system. So it is better you write comprehensive financial management system instead of writing CFMS. Then do not misrepresent data. When you are applying for a job or when you are writing for a potential client, give the correct figures of your organization, your profit line, what achievements you have made, give them the correct figures. Because in an age of communication, it is likely that your client or your recruiter will see through the lies that one makes, and it is likely that you may lose a business or you may lose a wonderful opportunity of getting into a better organization. Then we need to have very good communication skills. Communication skills here should be lucid, should be clear, and it should be understood very easily by everyone. And when the individual, a student, applies for a job, these days most of the jobs are fundamentally based on references given to them. So it is likely that the recruiter, amongst a lot of resumes or biodata or the CVs received by them, they may not be checking everything. Therefore, the individual or the student might call up once in a while, maybe once in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and courteously ask, sir, I have applied for this job. Can you please tell me when, by which date I am going to get the result? I'm eagerly waiting to join the organization. Then, how do we write effectively for results? Avoid being verbose. Their jargon, here verbose. You should use simple language where even every individual in the organization, whoever sees it, should be able to easily understand. Then use objective subject lines. Objective subject line is you are applying for the job of, say, an engineer, a mechanical engineer in, say, ONGC or in a mining corporation. So you should write the name of the job for what you are applying for carefully. That is the objective of your application. Then identify your audience. When you are sending a proposal to your client, you should know the client's business and their what are their business, other businesses or anything else they are into. Therefore, you will be able to write a better proposal for the clients. Then you must request for action, because if your proposal is clear, simple, you must ask them to settle for the business, and if they are interested, if they think that your business can deliver what you are promising, then you can request for action. And you must share company-wide messages with a strategy. What is the strategy? Suppose you send a mail to everybody asking for some information. Now, normally in organizations, what happens is, say there are about 20 departments. So 15 departments will respond immediately and 5 departments may not respond immediately. So in an organization, what we do is we'll send to all 20 people that we have not received reports from some of you, therefore you send. And because only 5 people have not responded, it is wise to send repeat mail to send the report to only 5 instead of the 15, 20. Then how to be a compelling writer? You should listen to your readers, the audience. You should believe in yourself. And this is just like that. You must show and share your passion and keep learning about new words. Then how to make a great presentation? You must state the objectives. In the beginning of this presentation, I said these are the 9 engagements objectives for today. So we have stated the objectives. So like that, you have to state the objectives. And analyzing the audience. I very well know that I am speaking to audience of students or faculty, or those students and faculty who may be looking for a job in a private organization or in governments. So therefore, my presentation on business communication should suit to the audience that I am speaking to. Likewise, you need to analyze your audience and make a good presentation. Avoid heavy text on PowerPoint slides, because the more you write, it is likely the listeners would be reading the slide rather than listening and understanding, whereby losing out on the content of the material. Then you revisit the objectives. You should, like I told you, I gave you 9 engagement objectives. So now I will always, when I make a presentation, I will be thinking whether are these 9 enough or should I add some more? And I'm giving a webinar for maybe 1 hour, 1 hour, 5 minutes. In this 1 hour, 5 minutes, will I fulfill my objectives? So this is how we revisit our objectives. So some of the presentation skills which is required: simplicity and unexpectedness. Because if you state the objectives, you cannot challenge the audience. Then our credibility, concreteness, emotions, whatever you present, it should pander to the audience emotions. They should feel that, oh yes, yeah, it looks like it's interesting. Yeah, it's going to be useful to me. So we must ensure that it suits their emotions. And it must be in the form of a story, because a story has all the elements of a thriller. And when you go to movie, you enjoy the movie, and after you come from the movie, you keep talking about the movie. If the movie is boring, you will say it's boring. So therefore, you must be a good storyteller when you make an effective presentation. Then we'll now talk about the use of body language in communication. If you see the picture of these two individuals, you can very well see that confidence is oozing from both of them. You can observe the confidence in their body language. Now, when we see the use of body language in communication, a study has been made wherein it has shown that the spoken words consist only of 7% of communication which can persuade, whereas 93% of our persuasion, of our closing of businesses, is based on our body language. Our body language should exude confidence. For example, if you see the picture here, the closing of the thumb and the forefinger, in India and America, we treat it as excellent, very good. In Tunisia, this symbol means I'll kill you. In Japan, it means money. See, there is a cultural connotation to the body language that you use. So in businesses, this is very, very important. For example, in China, because when you attend a business meeting, wearing dark glasses for a meeting is considered to be rude, because they want to see the feelings of the person who is engaging in a business with them. Then we talk of kinesics. Kinesics is nothing but the study of a body language. In an interview, how do we conduct ourselves in an interview or when we make a presentation? And one must be aware of how we use our body language effectively. If you see the mother and the child, see the joy in the eyes of the mother and the child, the eye contact, eye to eye, and then the handshake, the firm handshake. It should not be too tight. It should not be too loose. It should be just firm. And then crossing your arms. When we attend an interview or a meeting, if you cross your arms like this, it's considered to be rude, and it's considered that you are dominant for the session. So therefore, the crossing of arms is a no, strict no, no. Then the sitting posture. You have to sit straight when you attend an interview or when you're submitting a proposal or a presentation. You cannot sit like this. You cannot sit like this, slouched on the table. You should sit straight, appear nice, confident. Then if you see the gesture, the L, which is like this, in America, they say it's a loser. But in China, the same L is seen in a positive connotation as light. And see the facial expressions: sadness, happiness, wry, not bothered, those kind of expressions. So we should be very careful what kind of expressions we use in a formal situation like in an interview, or when you have gone somewhere to present a proposal and close business for your organization. Then if you see the 7 C's of communication, the first one is it should be very simple. Here, I must tell you that as simple as a guy who is 7 to 10 years old, who has done his 8th class, 9th class or 10th class should understand what you're trying to communicate. It's very difficult. Yeah, we get a lot of WhatsApp messages. It's very easy to be anything, but it's very difficult to be simple. Then it must be concise, to the point, because if you put in a lot of words, people will not have the patience to read and it will not go into their mind. It should be concise. Then it should be accurate. The facts and figures should be correct. The grammar, spelling, and language should be appropriate to suit the occasion. Then it must be complete, that it must convey all the information that is required to be conveyed. Then you must consider the audience. Say the psychology of the audience, the behavior. We call it entry behavior in training. Before you go for any interview or the business, you should understand your audience. Then it must be concrete. That is, it should be very specific. It should not be vague. Then, most important C is courtesy. And recently, I was speaking to a friend who works for Wipro, one of the top 5 big companies in India. The chairman, Rishabh Premji, has given he spoke with a lot of them on a video call. And when talking about courtesy, he was mentioning that all of us come to the office in the car, but do we check to thank the driver? While getting down, you can always say, thank you, Ramu. Have a nice day. Do we do that? So he's talking of that courtesy at that level itself. Then at a higher level, then you can always imagine how that courtesy is going to be. Then what are guidelines for effective communication? We must have clarity of purpose. Then it must be complete, because in the 7 C's we have noted about it. It should be concise. And here I am going to refer in a little bit lengthier about the feedback. Because when your client or your recruiter, a recruiter recruits you, it means that you have passed all the tests that is required to be selected to work in that particular organization. A proposal which you present to a client, if you close the business and get say 100 crores or 50 crores of business, which means that you have made a very good proposal. Suppose your client disagrees with whatever you say. He is not at all interested in talking to you on seeing the presentation, on seeing the proposal, because it is shabby. And because it is shabby does not mean the organization cannot do business. But the impression that you have created is a bad impression, is the wrong impression, which might lose a lot of business. Then you must have empathy. And again, going back to Rishabh Premji, the chairman of Wipro, my friend was telling me, when you have to inform a guy in your office, a girl in the office, that their attitude is not proper, I believe he has said that do not delay that, but say that with empathy. You can say, Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, I have heard something negative about you, but I'm sure you are well educated and you know the rules of the organization. Just keep an eye on how you handle certain issues and certain situations. See, that reeks of empathy. So that's how you need to be empathetic. And you can modify the message according to the audience. And then you must use multiple channels of communication. Today, you have a lot of electronic media. you have emails, you have WhatsApp, you email now is a official communication, then written communication, then there is oral communication. So then there's a visual communication. There could be something, which you are visual, like your body language. Then making effective use of grapevine. Here, grapevine means informal communication spoken between members of the organization, mostly in a negative way about the organization. It could be, say, promotion to somebody whom they think that the boss is very close to, or something like the organization might have got a lot of profits, but then usually they may think that, oh, this organization has got $100 billion as profit, but our bonuses, does not show that the kind of profit that the organization has earned. So by this, the managers must ensure that the correct information reaches everybody in the organization, thereby closing this grapevine channel of communication. Then how do we write effective reports? You made a presentation, you sent a resume, you made a proposal for a business. The same way, a report is nothing but a testimonial or an account of something happening in the organization. It is purely based on observation and analysis. Otherwise, as you cannot write a report without observing or without analysis. The report should give an explanation of the circumstances or whatever has been happening. In a corporate world, the reports definitely play a very, very important role. And this good report will be a strong base for planning and control in an organization. A report discusses a particular issue in detail. Here, in a report, a significant and reliable information is brought to the limelight to the top management. On seeing the report, the top management will know what is right in the organization, what is not right in the organization, or if something is not right, how it can be set right, how our business can be improved. On the basis of that information, the management can make good and effective decisions. The reports are required for judging the performance of various departments in an organization. Then the objective of the report should be very, very clear. You must collect the required material, you must study and examine the facts, and then you must prepare a draft report. If it is a draft report, you need to go through it again and again and edit it correctly for being clarity, for giving it a clarity and conciseness. And most likely, there will be a lot of experts in your organization. Show it to your experts and seek their feedback, and based on them, you can give recommendations in the report. Then we must be focused on the objective. A good report, it must be focused on the objective. You must analyze the audience and analyze the implications of the report. For example, you may send a report. The report need not be harsh. It can be the matter can be moderated and not be harsh. And based on the report, based on the facts, based on the analysis, based on the observation, the length of the report can be made, and it should disclose the correct information. The report should be reasonable and impartial, and you must concentrate on the report structure and matter, because based on this report, the top management will take effective decisions, which is good for the organization to suit the aims, objectives, vision, and mission of the organizations. Then it should be neatly presented and it should be carefully documented. You highlight and recap the main message in a report. Highlighting and recap in a official document, official report in organizations, you can see the executive summary at the beginning of the report. So you should encourage feedback on the report from the critics. If it is a negative, we learn from it. And we can always make mid-course correction based on the feedback. And use graphs, pie charts to show the numerical data records over the years, because it is easy on the eye and it's easy to grasp. And you should also attempt to generate the reader's interest, because if your readers are not going to read the report, what good is it going to do for your business or for the organization? Now, we'll go and we'll now identify how to write a good resume. What is a resume? Somebody was asking me, what is the difference between a resume and a CV? I'll come to it. Just keep thinking about it. We'll come to it at the end. A resume is a professional description about you. It intimates the experience, your experience and your educational background and some of your personal details. Amongst the personal details, the recruiter might be interested in where you are coming from, because in a certain area, the ecosystem of that particular skill may be more. It must be a professional document. It must be an objective statement which contains the summary of the skills or experience. It must show the core competencies, the employment details, employee educational background. It must be a tool to showcase your skill to a potential recruiter. There, in your resume, you will mark your achievements, what you have performed as in your job or in your college. How effectively have you made your projects? A perfect resume should be 1 or 2 pages document depending on the experience. If you have worked in more number of offices, it is likely, because of your experience, you may be writing more than a couple of pages also. But 1 or 2 pages seems to be ideal. Then a great resume catches the eye of the recruiter. And it should showcase your skills and achievements. It should instill confidence. It should make you think. It should make a lasting first impression. It should sell your skills. And what are the types of resume? Because in the university, the professional graduates, after completion of their course, are going to prepare a resume. What kind of resume must they prepare? Resumes are of different types. They can be chronological in order, from year 1 to year 10. A functional resume. Functional resume is your latest education to the former and older education. Or if you have job experience, your latest experience at the top, your old experience at the end. Then it could be both. It could be chronological and functional combined together. Then it could be a targeted resume. That is, if you are applying for say for the job of an actor, you need to prepare a video. It is targeted at the director. And when he sees your acting, he selects you for the job. Then a mini resume. Normally, this mini resume is for the top end jobs, because they already have submitted their resume, or their resume, they normally will have their own website, and from their website, their education and educational qualification experience details are culled and already known. In such cases, you send a mini resume, and based on a preliminary interview, like the recruiter understanding your qualification and skills and wants to add more, talk to you more about their requirements, whether the qualification and experience suits to their organization and not resume. There are certain creative jobs, like in an advertising agency. There, what you send is a non-traditional resume. It will be creative. Okay. For example, I am full of ideas. Probably you can color it. I am full of ideas. Like, the Google colors. Google has a lot of colors. You can say, I am full of ideas. Put them in a lot of color. That is a non-traditional resume. Then how to write an impressive resume? First things first, an objective or an opening statement, a gist of the profile summary, a skill section, a work experience, your education, and mind you, see, there are certain individuals, students, who may not have a lot of work experience, but you must have done a volunteer assignments. Please ensure that you add more volunteer assignments in your resume. And it should be tailor-made. Mostly, there are a lot of seniors who are experienced people. You can take their help. The relevant keywords must be visible in your resume. It must be in a proper format. It must be free of grammatical mistakes. It must be free of spelling mistakes. It must be properly formatted. And it must be specific for the job you are applying for. Remove any unnecessary details. The length of the resume should be right. Keep it professional and don't lie. Otherwise, your pants will be on fire. A small suggestion for all the guys out there. You structure the content first, because once you write, you may not be happy with that. So you make 2 or 3 drafts. So structure the content. Then put it in a very neat and an organized format to suit your profile. Then the aesthetics part should not be ignored. It should be clean. It should be neat. The minute we see it, see, there are certain fonts, the size of the font, the paper that you use. See, all these gives you aesthetics to your resume. Now, before I go, I was talking to you about the difference between a resume and a CV. Mostly, see, both could be the same, but generally, a resume is for a fresher, but whereas a CV is for those who are experienced and whose experiences must be put more into the document of your resume. Last, we'll go to business negotiation. This is a very, very important topic, because once you get into your job, it is how you negotiate, resolve disputes, and how you gather, generate profits, business for your organization is very, very important. It is synonymous with a settlement, an agreement, a collaboration, and bargaining. A negotiation is a channel of communication to reconcile differences and to settle conflicts jointly. Here, I underline the word reconcile. When we speak of reconcile, even in plain English, reconciling is understanding each other, and a lot of give and take takes place, and they come to a perfect understanding. That is called reconciliation. So, because of this reconciliation, you will achieve a win-win position. Then negotiation involves a minimum of 2 parties. The aim of the negotiations is to be understood by both the parties. They should be willing to arrive at a mutually agreeable outcome. The outcome must be acceptable to both the parties. In business communication, there are certain do's and don'ts. You emphasize on the mutually agreed issues. Suppose there are certain issues which you do not agree. Suppose you purchase 1,000 computers to your organization, and a couple of computers, there are problems with a couple of computers. So, 1% or 2% of the computers, which is fairly large, but then there may be a penalty clause in the agreement. When you talk of the penalty clause, you may as well say that initially you must have tried to talk to the client and say that, hey, there are certain issues in the systems. Would you be willing to change the system straight away rather than coming and repairing them? Normally in businesses, they will agree. But if we have not asked the client to do this first, and then we go in for the negotiation and going into a tricky situation where we do not agree on the penalty, when your client does not agree on the penalty, because your client is going to say, okay, you have said that there are problems in the systems, but you have not informed me that there are problems in the systems. So be honest and straightforward. and do not bother about the deadlines. Deadlines for negotiations. See, you sit once, you may not complete. Maybe you may have to sit twice, thrice. This is what we call business client meetings. Then there could be personal differences. Please keep away from them and just argue on facts and recap frequently. Listen to the other point of view if they are valid. If they are not valid, you are open to tell your client, or the client is free to tell you, but it must be done in a very, very courteous manner. Support your argument with facts. Don't make demands which can't be accepted at all. Say, it is likely that there are certain things when you buy computers, say in large numbers, if you don't use them for a long time, because of humidity, it is likely that certain systems may not start properly. So, suppose there are, if the mistake is at our end, and I'll tell you something, if you have a lot of systems, that is why you have a system administrator in your computer labs, because one of their jobs, the technical assistant jobs, is to ensure that if the lab is closed for a long time, your computer lab is closed for a long time, they should ensure that at frequent intervals, once in every week, all the systems should be switched on and then they must be switched off so that humidity does not enter into the systems. Do not let emotions overwhelm you. Be optimistic and don't fear losing, because this is a business, one business. It is likely you might do more number of businesses with your client. Yeah, that's all for today. These are my credentials. Well, these are my credentials. I have been in service for almost 30 years. What we have tried to do in this session is, we may have knowledge, but we may have skills. But if you do not have the right attitude, you cannot be a good communicator. You cannot learn properly. This is the most important point of training. And once you have the knowledge, skills, and attitude, you will develop very good habits. So this is, I just thought as an afterthought, I thought let me add this. And this is some of the points to ponder. Like one of the, you can tell me whether this is a right communication or not. The US president wants to mediate between the India and China issue in this Galwan Valley and the Pangang Tso Lake standoff. And India doesn't want Trump to mediate, and China doesn't want Trump to mediate. But Trump has said that he would like to mediate. Now, you can just try and understand, based on what we have discussed, whether it is a good communication, or that communication as a business communication between nations and nations are necessary at all. Then how do we allow and use feedback? Feedback is a very, very important principle which is integral to communication. And there will be a lot of barriers to communication, like lack of knowledge, lack of knowledge, lack of there could be noise around you. There could be, it could be spoken in a different language, or lingo, different lingo, which it will take time. It's not that we don't understand. An Arab might be speaking in a different way. An Italian might be speaking in a different way. A European and Americans might be speaking in a different way. But it will take time for us to understand. So we need to first get into that groove. Only then we'll be able to understand. So is it difficult to overcome barriers to communication? I'm just giving you certain thoughts to ponder. Just think about it, because we have heard about a webinar on business communication. Just putting a few thoughts to you so that you can ponder about it, so that you don't forget the webinar. I'm just kidding. Then effective communication is success, and success is effective communication. Please empower yourself with knowledge and I wish you all the best. Sir, to the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mizoram Central University, a very huge, big thanks to you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. And thanks to the organizing secretary and all the organizers. And thanks to the audience for joining the seminar. That there you have my name and my email ID. So anything you need on business communication, I think I will be able to, maybe not solve the problems, but definitely I can give you a lot of pointers to effective business communication. So thank you one and all. Thank you so much. And once again, good evening, Mizoram. A very good evening, Mizoram University. Let greater deeds remain. Thank you one and all.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So I would like to inform the participants again that if there are any questions that you'd like to ask, you can mail to our resource persons, as their information has been put up on the screen. Yes, and I'd also like to inform all the participants that for future viewing, this video will be uploaded in the MZU YouTube channel. So last but not the least, I'd like to thank everyone today who has attended this webinar. And I'd also like to thank our respected Honorable Vice Chancellor, Mizoram University, Professor KRS Sambasiva Rao, for supporting us and guiding us in every way possible. I'd also like to thank Professor Muthukumaran, Sir, Department of Chemistry, for also organizing this webinar today. And last but not the least, I'd like to thank all the esteemed participants of this webinar, because without your presence, this would have never been possible. I'd also like to thank our computer center staffs, Dr. Kluanga and Sir Sure, for their technical support in making this webinar a success. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we can take leave, sir.
Yes, you can leave.
Yeah, right, sir. Thank you.